Welcome to What's the Point? A weekly discussion of truth, realities, challenges, theological and philosophical views, national policies, and international concerns. Welcome to What's the Point? Today we're actually starting a 3-part series on Jesus. So today we're going to be talking about, it's titled, John the Baptist Prepared the Way for Jesus Christ. So let's start with, who is John the Baptist?
I always start giving an introduction of our character. And so John the Baptist is probably one of the strangest person I have read about. And he's also considered one of the strangest even in his generation. He lived in the desert. He only ate like locust and honey because he was a Nazarite, really. So something like the style of Samson, that you can't even cut the hair.
Wow.
So he was very obedient there, and he was wearing camel's hair for clothes and a leather belt, and he was not using the normal clothes of people at the time. So it's really strange. He was living in the desert, whereas the others were living in town. But he had the character, and he knew his mission, and he was obedient. He was humble. But the strange part that even I had to look it up and think, why did Jesus call him the greatest man who ever lived?
Did he really call him that?
Yeah. So Jesus described him as no one is greater before or after than John the Baptist, which means he was greater. He was greater than Moses, Elijah, Joshua, David, Paul, because before and after, Jesus himself said, no woman or man who ever lived or has ever lived and who will ever live will be greater than this man. And that is really strange, I said, because we look at it from a different perspective. Then we'll discuss that later, why Jesus called him that. But he prepared the way. He was baptizing people. He was talking about forgiveness of sins. He was talking about the Messiah. And when he saw Jesus, he said, I'm not even worthy to pick up his sandals. So he was really truly humble. And he was really just pointing to Jesus.
Yeah.
And
what do you think, Josh? Who is he?
Well, I like the mention of John the Baptist in the aspect of, his humbleness and things. And I've been learning in seminary the aspect of like a monastic lifestyle. And I feel like he kind of lived that up. So meaning lives on caves and stuff, and like aspect of being secluded, so you see, those people do those things. And it's pretty impressive because their heart to do those things is like, sometimes they don't mind going on caves and stuff because they want to get away from the world so that they can focus on Jesus or on God, right? And just literally have that mindset of, I just want to talk to God, right?
Yeah.
And but he balanced that out too with his ministry of like, because he had disciples as well. So he balanced that out too with like making sure that he's not like super secluded where he doesn't help people out, right? Because the issue is like, for those people, I don't know if you heard it, but this powerful thing, for those people who are, they're so in tune with the Holy Spirit, they're so in tune with God. Sometimes the issue is because they're so heavenly minded, they now become no earthly good.
Oh, wow. So then they just kind of like stop becoming people on earth and like not
Or
really
stop-
like they're not really like relatable anymore. Is that what you mean?
Right. Or like not because they're focused on God that they forget about the mission of like helping people out. But that's not John the Baptist. I just say that in general, but that's not John the Baptist, right? He takes the time to help people out, takes the time to go out of his way and really follow God's heart. And so I think this was awesome about him is, I think the real reasons why, like that I was saying, the fruits of the Spirit is because, that he is greater than any man ever is maybe because he might not be the richest person ever. So you can't really say he's in the Solomon level. So it's probably not the richest of it. So the only really aspect of why he's called the greatest man ever probably is because he showed the fruits of the Spirit maybe more than any other man ever.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I believe, so I was really thinking very hard about why did really Jesus call him the greatest man who ever lived. And I realized one thing, that God does not look at a person in terms of performance, in terms of skills, in terms of influence. He does not look at a person or even his servants in terms of how the world views them. We always look at great as presidents, prime ministers, great men of God.
Right.
I mean, people who do great contribution to humanity. That is how we determine greatness. And that was not the greatness that Jesus was referring. He was looking at the heart. And I believe, based on his evaluation, John the Baptist had the best character, probably even better than Joshua's, or even David's, or even Moses.
Wow.
So,
which those are already really big. Like those characters are already really big and important.
Yeah, but these big characters were doing big contributions. But John the Baptist, his character must be something so impressive. Josh was saying about the fruit of the Spirit. Jesus must have really seen in his heart a true character. And certainly the humility of John the Baptist is beyond anyone's comparison. I think that is his trait. He was so humble that he just thinks of himself as a plain messenger, period.
But people have to understand this. So
yeah,
they won't understand the concept of how humble he really is till they see how much influence he had at the time.
Yeah,
he had
elaborate
so much
a little bit
influence on people that they thought he was the Messiah himself.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
that's how much influence he had. So, but the thing, you're at your prime, but the humility, the non-threatedness, because if you're human, right, you'd be threatened when people are people are cheering on to you, and now you just come to your life. You should, like, if you're in the human flesh, you should be threatened because now that attention is not on you.
Right.
Right.
Because
he could have been this false Messiah
the people, but I guess because he knew the truth, because he's technically Jesus' cousin. But
right.
they were only like, or aren't they only a few months apart? It's not, but he had been in ministry all his life, right?
Yeah, but understand the context here. The people of God were technically scattered and punished, and they technically lost their nationhood for a while. And the last prophet before John the Baptist was Malachi 400 years before that.
So was that wow, really?
Yeah.
So there was no prophet for 400 years?
Yeah, there was no prophet for 400 years. There was no prophet for 400 years. And so John the Baptist was the first official prophet after 400 years of waiting. And that's the reason why he was so prominent, because they even thought he was the Messiah, because they were waiting for a Messiah, and because there was no prophet, they had no guidance. As he was thinking that, okay, John the Baptist could be the Messiah, he was even asked, "Are you Moses, Elijah, or
I didn't know that. So, that's big, yeah.
And so all the attention was on him, and yet he was saying, "No, I'm just the messenger." Now, it's just really a simple illustration, and I think that was why what God saw is his absolute humility. Remember, which is the opposite of Lucifer or Satan, who was wanting to usurp the throne. Yeah. And here is John the Baptist, who could have done that, but did not.
He could have, yeah.
Yeah, he could have. Oh yeah, I am. But he did not. And it's really strange how he just said, "I am the messenger." Now, the simple illustration to that is this: when somebody delivered a gift for you from me, from the Philippines. Did you remember the mailman or the delivery man?
No.
You did not, right? You only remember the sender and the gift, the giver and the gift. You never remember the delivery man, or the mailman or the DHL man who did that. That's exactly what John the Baptist was in character. He really did not want any recognition at all because I am only a delivery man. I am not the giver. I am not the message. I'm just a delivery man, so I am nothing.
Wow.
So that I think really impressed Jesus in this character.
Right. And then the aspect of submission too, right? The submission of John the Baptist to just every single time, if you look at the premise of like his life, every single time, I mean, like he submitted to the authority of Christ. And, you know, he's like, honestly, I mean, he wasn't a disciple of Jesus, but like, here's this, you know, if you look at it, he understood from the beginning where the other disciples didn't really understand. Right. Yeah. So that's an impressive thing to, you know, have that submission to Jesus and say, hey, like, you know, I'm a great influence, but like, this is an insane thing, right? He's, you know, the biggest Christian at the time, and to say that, hey, but he understood that, hey, I can't even carry your sandals. I can't even, and when he got baptized, I can't, like, it's funny. It's just like, you know, just kind of this bantering, but like, it's the aspect of like, hey, bro, like, why am I baptizing you? I can't do this.
Yeah.
And this would happen.
Yeah, exactly. Because he's like, oh, I can't baptize you because.
And Jesus doesn't say, you're right. He doesn't say, yeah, you can't. He doesn't even say, yeah, you can. He understood that John the Baptist, even in his holiness, cannot baptize Jesus, right? Because he's not, it's true, he's not worthy. But Jesus says, he doesn't like, you know, kind of like, you know, I guess, hype him up or anything. He just says, look, you just have to do this.
Yeah, you just basically, it's like he commanded him to baptize him, type of
exactly.
Because technically, Jesus is still the boss.
Because if I was John the Baptist, I'd be thinking, oh, look, wow, thank you for this privilege. Like, I'm ready to do this. But his humility was so insane to say, hey, I can't even do this.
That
even after a nice body of work that you already had.
Even what?
Even like, think about, that's insane to think about, right? It's the aspect of he did not think of himself as worthy to carry or baptize Jesus, even when his body of work was one of the best ever.
Right.
So it's just if some Steph Curry, let's say, says no to the Hall of Fame, even though his body of work says he's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that's true.
But here is another thing that I think no pastor would do that John the Baptist did. He already had followers earlier than Jesus. He already had disciples. He had admirers. He had a lot of, technically he already had a big congregation or a denomination, if you like to call it. But when Jesus came and started the ministry, he literally turned over his congregation to Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I was about to say that because I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, he literally said, okay, here is the man I was talking about. So I'm giving this, all of you, follow him and stop following me. Have you heard of a pastor who said, oh, I really am impressed with this pastor. I really like him. I believe he's far better than me. Guys, I'm turning you over, all of you. I will close this church. You attend his church.
Right now, it's like
I'm done.
Right now, a lot of pastors, even though they're pastors and they should be doing, like, they get like in the church I go to right now, there was a little bit of a lot of people had left because they followed the past. So like the young adult pastor went to a different church. And so like half the congregation followed, and it's been kind of like an awkward situation because, like it sounds like it's like a competition, but it's not, because they're supposed to be serving the same God. So it shouldn't be a competition. But with John the Baptist, he just like let them go. Cause the show, The Chosen, that I always talk about, there's an episode there that they introduce John the Baptist. And he looks so raggedy, like the disciples, they already look like they're walking around, but like John looks so like the cast already looks weird. And then he like turned over his disciple. I can't even remember his, because in the show there wasn't just 12. There was like 12 main ones, but there's like other ones that like just come and help and stuff. And he like turned them over to Jesus to help, to like help him with his ministry. And then he just like left. Like he didn't even stay with Jesus. He just like left and then left his guys there. And then I guess he got
It's crazy. Again. It's crazy too to think about it. So you look at all the characters we talk about in the Bible. If you look at it, almost all of them, if not all of them, have one common thing is, a lot of the times their flaws are shown in the Bible, right? But in John the Baptist case, I don't think, in me reading the New Testament, I don't think there's one instance where they talk about his flaws at all.
Yeah, it's like Joshua. No flaws mentioned. But you see, that's really crazy. Could you just imagine a pastor would say, "Oh, you'll have my pastor. I'm really impressed with your ministry. I'm turning over my ministry to you, and I just would like to be your janitor."
Right. It's like, can you imagine it's like okay, like a big one, like Joel Osteen or something, right? And then he just turns it over to like a pastor that's just like starting his like first church.
I wouldn't mind Joel Osteen turning it over to Kazam.
That's a great point though, because at this time, Jesus was a no-name, right? It makes sense.
He's like nobody. No one really believed in him.
Yeah.
And he had to like he had to show he had to show miracles for people to like even start, like because they would follow him because he was like healing people and like, oh, let's check out the guy that heals and says that, but it wasn't like Jesus just walked in and like, oh my gosh, that looks like a Messiah. Like, I mean, that's why they've crucified him.
Before I forget, we had a little experience like that in Kazam, but not because someone was greater than the other, but because probably Brother Jun Tabak, remember him? Well, he was. We were together when I was still single. Your mom was still single. We were with the Campus Crusade for Christ professional ministry, and so then for a while he assisted me when I was planting a church in Manila. I think 30 plus years ago. And then we parted ways because he was really an evangelist. He was the bravest he who will witness to buses, trucks, buses, planes, jeepney, motorcycle. No one can stop him from witnessing. He will just talk about Jesus. I mean, you will be literally ashamed when you are with him. In the airport, even in the plane, he will stand and he will witness about Jesus in the bus, in a pretty
so like he doesn't even pick like a good time to do it.
No, any place. So therefore, in the bus, he was slapped, he was hit, punched, he was thrown out of the bus all throughout his life. Yeah, because he had a mission that he wanted to witness to approximately 1 million people in his life.
Wow.
So he was trying to count how many people in this bus. I'm 50, so I witnessed. So he was counting. And as a result of that, he had like a few churches that were developed. And then some 5 years ago or so, maybe 5 or 7 years ago, we met again. He attended a church in Kazam, and he said, "We really have the same mission, Pastor." He said, "I just felt that after a while, after times of prayer, I just felt that I will turn over my ministry to you."
What?
So he turned over. Our Batangas church was a result of his mission, and some of the churches in Cavite, about 4 or 5 of the churches under.
What is he doing now?
He turned over, and even his disciples are one of our few of our leaders in the church. So he turned over, and then 2 years after he died.
Oh,
he died. Remember?
Yeah,
he's the one on the tumor.
Yeah, he's
the
one
tumor
that we met with the tumor. I remember him now. Okay, that's what I thought it was him, but when you said it was a couple years ago.
Yeah, he was the one with the tumor. So probably he knew that he was going by God, and he was looking for where he can turn over his ministry. That's a different case, but I just
but then now
remember
they're
him.
all kind of related to.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
But he was a strange person too. Very much like
Why?
Because that gets embarrassed because he just like, gets up in the middle of the plane.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing though. I mean, that's shameless, right? That's what we aspire to do.
Yeah. In fact, one time I think in the plane, so he stood up. I think if I remember the story, and testified, and so the stewardess tried to stop him down and reported him to the pilot. And the pilot, I think, was a Christian. The pilot said, just let him go. Let him go do that. That's his right. The pilot allowed him to do that. So
that is crazy.
Yeah. I mean, literally, he would be embarrassed. Even when he rides, here what we call habal-habal, like single car, motorcycle, where you ride at the back.
Oh, yeah. So then he's talking to the guy.
He's talking to the guy.
And the guy has no choice but to listen because he can't kick him out.
Yeah. And that's the reason why he did not buy a car.
So he would always have to go on public transportation.
Yeah, public transport. Yeah. So he was thrown out of a bus. He was hit in the head, hit in the face, punched by a conductor, something like that, for doing that.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. And that's kind of like, it sounds like what. Well, his name is June, but then it's close because it's John the Baptist. So it's very close.
Yeah.
So why when did John the Baptist ministry kind of start? Like, why do we say he prepared the way? Like, was he just talking about Jesus really like being the Messiah? Because it basically how long was he doing that? Because they're only months apart. So he knows Jesus is hanging out over there.
Yeah, my estimate, I'm not 100% sure, accurate about this, but my estimate is that Jesus started his full-time ministry at age 30.
Right.
For 3 years only, and died at age 33. I think John the Baptist did it 3 years earlier than that.
Oh, so it wasn't that long.
That long, 3 to 5 years max. So that he was at the height of his popularity, and comes Jesus, who's a nobody. And then he said, this is the man, this is the guy I'm talking about. So this is, from now on, stop listening to me, listen to him.
Right. And like, so he probably, it's pretty crazy because at the end of the day, like, Jesus is like the center, you know?
Yeah. It's like Joel Austin. He's now so popular, right? And then he suddenly said, oh, by the way, I've really told you about the beauty of ministry and everything. Now let me introduce you now to the pastor who will succeed me. I'm turning this over to Josh, a graduate of Baylor.
Oh, there it is.
You don't know him, but you know he's better than me. See, something like that. That's
the aspect that's crazy. Is the thing that he glorifies God, right? Jesus, like, he's better than me, and this idea too, of the aspect of like, wow, man, he knew his role. He knew when to be done. You know what I'm saying? So he knew, like, okay, like, I guess he was just very thankful because that's the only way that I can think about like how he's able to do that. I think he's able to do that because he was so thankful with the time that was given to him as a leader, that he knew his role. Unlike Saul, who didn't want to give up the kingdom.
Which it wasn't like when Samuel said that about Saul, like what God said, that it wasn't like Saul took it as the kingdom was going to get taken away from him right there and then he got crazy instead of just accepting that, like,
thank you for because he ruled for like 40 years. So it's he
ruled for 40 years, even with all his mess ups. You know what I mean? Like, if he didn't even mess up, he might have ruled for longer. Because David was just a kid.
I want to say too, 40 years, that's in their society, that is the full term.
Right. Yeah. Like the
full
term.
So he served his full term and he wasn't happy with that. You know what I mean? Like, that's crazy.
Well, he served his full term, but I felt like he spent half of it chasing David around.
Yeah.
He wasn't, you know what I mean? He wasn't really, which he could have. So John, like you said, he knew he knew the role, and he knew he knew what he had to do. So I guess another question I have is, like, what kind of like what kind of things can we like learn from John? Because I mean, obviously we've been talking about his aspect, like how did he run his ministry? You know, like was he just constantly like teaching everywhere, or I don't know if it's really written in detail, like how he did, kind of like how he ran his ministry. Like how did he become so successful? Because it's kind of hard.
This is the strange and yet I think the very profound way of appreciating it. John lived in the desert, which is, if you've been in the desert, so silent, there's just nothing there but God. And so he lives there so that he can listen to no other but God. And then at the proper time, he goes to town as well to minister. So his ministry style is that he is secluded so he can talk to God, to recharge, and then goes to the urban area to preach and minister. So I don't know how that looks like in Texas, but he goes to Dallas and Houston on certain days, but goes to a hunting place or some place in Texas with no other people, maybe in somewhere in near.
But can you imagine though, like if there were those prophets now, like okay, I mean, but like imagine how, like, okay, right now, if you see someone at like the corner store in Valero, just like screaming about Jesus or whatever, or just imagine the setting now. Because I'm trying to think, how did he get people to listen to him before? Or like just Jesus? Because imagine like some guy who looks like a homeless man, like out in the corner store and just like talking about like someone like, oh, Jesus, but you don't know who this Jesus is, right? That's kind of hard to like.
Well, that's why I want to emphasize to people that, you know, if John the Baptist can do it, anybody can do it. The reason why is because it's not him that's moving, it's the Holy Spirit in him that's moving, right? So it's the idea of like, it doesn't matter how raggedy you look, it doesn't matter if you have teeth or not, like, you know, if the Holy Spirit's working with you, you're gonna see it.
But here is the other aspect there. Is the reason why he had following it, because it was not about him, it was about the message he was carrying. So no matter who you are, rich or poor, whatever your condition, if your message makes sense, people will listen to it. It was the message that brought the people drawn to him, and that's the reason why when Jesus came, he said, "This was who I was talking about all along."
And the message,
the beautiful,
So I mean, John the Baptist is like the MC for Jesus, right? It's simply that. Introducing Jesus to the party.
Introducing Jesus at the party,
And it's this aspect too that, you know, John the Baptist, what's cool about him is that, like, if you look at it, people are hungry, right? 400 years of this nothingness, right? So they're hungry. So actually, if you look at what John the Baptist was preaching, he's preaching a lot of hope that people did not have for a long time, saying that it's coming soon, right?
Right. And it's really soon. Like it was like, if, you know, let's say it was 4 or 5 years, that's not really as bad as 400. You know what I mean?
Now, this is the issue, though, was when he turned it over to Jesus, people expected a military leader. Yeah. And that's not what they got. And that's the issue, right? It was because he was saying these grand introductions, right? Wow, this guy's going to be it's going to be crazy, right? He's going to everlasting kingdom, right? Imagine this. I'm saying, okay, because Jesus, he was not impressive at all physically. He was around like 5'1" or 5'5", so around my height, right?
Right.
So, but what's really funny is this aspect of like, you imagine somebody, it's like a superhero. You're hyping up a superhero, and all of a sudden when you see the superhero, you're like, how's this?
You're like, work? What? Yeah, exactly. Like you're like,
you know what I'm saying?
Because you're like, oh, this is great leader, and you know he's gonna change the world. He's the Messiah. He's the Son of God or whatever, right?
That's what John was saying.
Yeah, that's what John was saying. And then like open a curtain, and then someone walks in, and you're like,
and it's me out there walking. No.
They were expecting what, like Chris Hemsworth?
Yeah, that's what you know. That's when you know you have nothing. Even your dad laughs. That's not gonna work. It's not gonna work, man. You know what I mean? So that's the aspect.
No,
but that's
I was laughing at your humility. It looks like
we were laughing at your humility. There it is.
Yeah.
So that's the cool thing, it's not gonna work, you know what I'm saying? So, but that's the aspect of like, but little did we know that we were wrong. Obviously, he was talking about everlasting kingdom. His army is talking about spiritual, right? And so this is something that just flip the script, man. You're talking about fine print, man. Like that was fine print for sure, because people were thinking differently, right? And it was cool
because they were hoping that this Messiah, because they said like, oh, someone's gonna come and save the world, and in their mind, like saving the world,
and
okay,
rule,
right now,
rule,
right? Because they were under Roman rule, right? So they were like essentially, I mean, I wouldn't say slaves because they got like paid, but they had to pay like extreme amount of taxes, and that's why they hated Matthew so much, because he was a tax collector. And so that, and then you get someone that doesn't do that, I guess is why they were so disappointed at first.
Even Peter was like, hey, let's get the swords out, and Jesus like, no, we're not gonna do that.
No, exactly.
You know what I mean?
There's something I forgot to tell you, that John the Baptist came from the lineage of Aaron, the priest, all the way through the Old Testament, and he was from the tribe of Levi.
Right, so he's a Levite, and Levites were supposed to be like priests.
Yeah, the priest, and then Aaron, and then, by the way, when Zechariah, Zechariah was the name of his father, was told by the angel that you will have John the Baptist as your son who will prepare the way for Jesus Christ, he could not speak. He became like,
he was like mute for like until he was born.
And then he was born. So imagine that, he was muted for 9 months.
Yeah.
I was just muted for a few minutes a while ago.
He didn't believe it.
Yeah, I was just muted a while ago. I was already mad for a few seconds. He was muted for 9 months.
Exactly. Man, it's crazy.
Until well, God has a reason for saying that, because Zechariah could well be a prophet too. But God said, no, I don't want you to speak. I want your son to.
I want your son to speak. Yeah.
So I could have been a pastor in the US, but God is saying, no, I want your son to.
Oh, there it is.
He's trying to make up for laughing earlier.
He's trying to make up for laughing for the John the Baptist setup.
So now he feels guilty because he laughed at me earlier, so he's trying to offset it by complimenting me.
Yeah, basically, that's just how we do it.
No. That's not what I mean.
Really, my final question, which is like, what's the point? Like, what's the point of talking about John the Baptist? Because this is a 3-part series on Jesus. Next week, we're going to be talking about Jesus's ministry. So kind of just wrap up, like, what is the importance of John?
I can go first.
Story. Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
Just circulate this thing. It seems like John the Baptist had this perfect life, but maybe he did. And people say, where's his persecution, right? Everything was all good. Everything was, beautiful. And for the longest time, it really was, right? But I want to encourage somebody, like, God's not a liar. So he also experienced persecution because this guy was beheaded.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
For what he believed in. Unfortunately, it was a strange beheading too, because it was, you know what I mean? Like it was a request. So it was like this daughter of this one mother. And the mother was evil, right? It was so evil.
It was so evil.
And then the request. So literally there's this, girl that the king liked is like, oh, I'll give you up to half my kingdom.
Yeah.
Right. Whatever you ask, I'll give you. And then I don't know why it was to the girl, not to the mother. I don't know why the girl did not do what her wish was, instead of saying, because the girl asked the mother, like, what should I get? You know what I'm saying? And I don't know why she would ever listen to the mother, but the mother asked,
like,
give me John the Baptist's head on a platter.
Yeah.
On a platter.
On a platter.
So I don't understand that idea of like, if I'm the girl, I'm like, okay, mom, half the kingdom, I'll take that. John the Baptist will die. He'll die eventually.
Exactly.
Right? Exactly. I don't understand.
And I don't really know why.
Happened.
But and so he did face persecution,
Yeah, but he died a very sacrificial, martyr death. Well,
right. Which actually, that's why maybe too, he's the best and nobody else is better. He lived this almost probably close to perfect life, right? Yeah. And Jesus said that there's no greater sacrifice than dying for God.
Wow.
So his whole life was a depiction of the perfectness.
Yeah, and I was also looking. Moses, Joshua, David, Paul, they were not beheaded.
They were not.
They were
exactly.
They were not. So here is.
They were not martyred. They were not martyred.
Yeah.
They were not martyred. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that.
So maybe that's why he's the best ever.
Yeah. So here is a perfect man and ended up like that. So, I think we have to look at John the Baptist in terms of his really no compromise life, meaning he really never compromised at all. He was completely obedient in what God said. He was consistently humble. I mean, given chances to be great, but he did not. And he was comfortable being different. Meaning, we people tend to go with the flow. He was just against the flow in his clothing, in his manner of talking, in his message. I mean, how difficult is that to be different from others?
And then also, he didn't let the fame get to his head.
Yeah.
One of the hardest things to do.
Yeah. But the hardest part is to be different. Would you really want to be in an office where you are known to be different? You have a different way of dressing, different way of talking, your message
and that's why and that's why he's so good, because he, like you said, he basically just made it all about Jesus. But anyway, that was a really good discussion on him. It sets us up for next week for Jesus's ministry. So I'll go ahead and close this in prayer. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this time together that we can talk about John the Baptist. Thank you for his life. Thank you for really his humility, his obedience to you. And thank you that we can study a character who really is the best and gave everything to you. And so we can live a life at least trying to mirror something like that. So thank you for this time that we can discuss him. And I pray that someone's life can be touched by this message and this story. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.